This is a lumbar disc seen from above, and it is built like a radial tire. The outer wall is the annulus fibrosus, sheets of collagen laid in concentric rings, and the fibers in each ring run obliquely, alternating direction layer by layer. That crossed arrangement is what lets the disc resist twisting. In the center sits the nucleus pulposus, a water-rich gel that behaves hydraulically. Load the spine, and the nucleus pushes outwards in every direction at once, and the annulus holds it in, converting compression into tension in the fibers. Behind the disc, in the canal, sits the thecal sac carrying the nerve roots. And now notice the geometry that decides everything that follows. The annulus is thick and strong in front. Behind, and especially at the posterolateral corner, it is thinner, and it is not reinforced by the posterior longitudinal ligament, which narrows as it descends. So the disc has a weak point, and the weak point points directly at the nerve roots. Watch the weak corner. Repeated loading, especially loading in flexion combined with rotation, produces small radial tears in the annular lamella. The nucleus is under pressure, so it follows those tears outwards. First, the outer fibers are still intact, and the disc simply bulges. The contour pushes back, but nothing has escaped. Then the nucleus tracks further through the annulus, while the outermost layer still contains it, and that is a protrusion. When nuclear material breaches the last fibers and enters the canal, it is an extrusion. And if a fragment separates entirely from the parent disc, it is a sequestration. Those four words are not just classification. They predict behavior, and, as we will see later, the ones that look worst on the scan are often the ones that resolve best. But here is the part that is genuinely surprising. Pressure alone is a poor explanation for the pain. You can press on a normal nerve and produce numbness and weakness, but not this kind of burning, traveling pain. What makes a compressed root hurt is that nucleus pulposus is chemically hostile to nerve tissue. It has never been exposed to the immune system, and when it breaches the annulus, it triggers an inflammatory response, with inflammatory mediators sensitizing the nerve root directly. That is why a small extrusion can be agonizing, while a large bulge can be silent, why the pain often settles long before the scan changes, and why the disc material itself, not just its size, is the problem. This is where most people go wrong, and the logic is worth getting exactly right. In the lumbar spine, each nerve root exits underneath the pedicle of its own numbered vertebra. So the L5 root leaves the canal under the L5 pedicle, which means at the L4-5 disc, the L5 root has not exited yet. It is still descending through the canal, crossing that disc on its way down. We call it the traversing root. The root that is leaving at that level, the L4 root, sits up in the foramen, out to the side and above. Now put the herniation where it actually happens, posterolateral, and the answer falls out. A posterolateral L4-5 disc hits the traversing root, L5. A posterolateral L5 S1 disc hits S1. The exception proves the rule. A far lateral herniation, out in the foramen, misses the traversing root and catches the exiting one instead. So a far lateral L4-5 disc gives you L4. And once you know the root, you can predict the entire clinical picture without touching the patient. An L4 root gives pain down the front of the thigh to the medial calf, weakness of knee extension and of the tibialis anterior, and a reduced knee jerk. An L5 root, the commonest, gives pain down the lateral leg into the dorsum of the foot and the first web space, weakness of great toe extension, weakness of ankle dorsiflexion, and characteristically no reflex change at all, because L5 has no easily tested deep tendon reflex. An S1 root gives pain down the back of the leg into the sole and lateral foot, weakness of plantar flexion, and a reduced or absent ankle jerk. If you learn one table in this lecture, learn this one, because it is the bridge between the scan and the patient. 2 examination points are worth more than the rest. The straight leg raise stretches the sciatic nerve and its roots, With the patient supine, you lift the straight leg, and reproduction of the patient's radicular pain, not simple hamstring tightness, between roughly 30 and 70 degrees is the positive finding. It is a sensitive test, so a negative straight leg raise makes a lower lumbar disc herniation less likely. But it is not specific. Plenty of positives are not discs. The cross straight leg raise is the mirror image. Lifting the good leg reproduces pain in the bad one. That is far less sensitive, but when it is present, it is highly specific for a disc herniation. Sensitive test to rule out, specific test to rule in. The same logic you use everywhere else in medicine. Cauda equina syndrome is the one that must never be missed, and it is the reason you ask about bladder and bowel function in every single patient with sciatica, however routine they seem. Below the conus, the lumbosacral roots run as the cauda equina, and a large central disc herniation can compress the whole bundle at once. The warning features are bilateral leg pain, saddle anesthesia, numbness around the perineum, genitals and inner thighs, new bladder dysfunction, most ominously painless retention with overflow, loss of bowel control, and loss of anal tone or sexual function. Suspecting it is an emergency. It needs urgent MRI and, if confirmed, surgical decompression without delay, because the neurological recovery you get is strongly related to how compressed the roots were and how long they stayed that way. A patient who develops painless retention is not a patient to review in clinic next week. Here is the fact that should shape the whole conversation. Left alone, most sciatica from a disc herniation gets better. The majority of patients improve substantially over weeks to a few months without any operation at all. And the disc itself often disappears. Herniated material is resorbed over time, broken down by an inflammatory and vascular response. The same inflammation that made it hurt is part of what clears it. The counterintuitive part is that the larger, more dramatic herniations resorb more readily than small contained bulges, because a sequestrated fragment out in the canal is fully exposed to that vascular response. So the scan that looks alarming often carries the better natural history. That is why, in the absence of red flags, early imaging is not recommended. It changes management rarely, and it frightens people frequently. One more piece of evidence changes how you read every scan you will ever see. Imaging studies of people with no back pain at all find disc abnormalities routinely. Disc degeneration and bulges are common in asymptomatic adults, and they become steadily more common with age. In other words, a disc bulge on a scan may be an incidental finding of being alive rather than the explanation for the symptom. So the scan never makes the diagnosis on its own. The finding has to match the root, and the root has to match the leg. If the MRI shows an L4-5 herniation, but the patient's numbness is in the sole of the foot and the ankle jerk is gone, the story does not fit, and you should be looking harder, not operating faster. Discectomy, usually a microdiscectomy, removing the fragment that is compressing the root, is a good operation for the right patient, and understanding what it does and does not do is the whole art. What it reliably does is relieve leg pain, and relieve it faster. Randomized evidence comparing surgery with continued conservative care for lumbar disc herniation shows that surgical patients improve more quickly, with the advantage clearest in the early months. Over the following year or two, the conservatively treated group catches up substantially because most of them were going to get better anyway. So the honest framing is that surgery mostly buys speed of recovery from leg pain, not a different final destination, with the crucial exceptions where it is not optional at all: cauda equina syndrome and a progressive or severe motor deficit. And note what is not on that list: back pain. Discectomy is an operation for the leg, not for the back.